Today, we're looking at Robert Oster's Caffe Crema. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Robert Oster's Caffe Crema is a brown ink. And to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, what I do is I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Pilot Metropolitan with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we get to the writing samples, let's take a look at the sciencey bits. And up first is the chromatography. And I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately dunk it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this peach color left behind as it pushes up into a very nice warm orange. And then it becomes brown with a dark line at the top. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And what I see is it looks exactly the same. This gives me the idea automatically that I expect this to have no resilience at all. I don't expect this to be able to just stay on the page. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean out of your pens. I let the smear dry for 3 days before I test it. Looking at the highlighter is a surprising result because it did not bleed out, it didn't feather all over, it didn't spread, it didn't do anything. It just highlighted. Very interesting. I like using brown inks. I would probably use this as a note taker. Looking at the water, it completely reactivates and pulls it up off the page. This is a warning sign for when you have to highlight. I can see the dots of the rhodia through the circle from the water, and that was only 30 seconds. Pen Flush did the same thing as water, but I expect it only takes water to clean this from your pen. The Pen Flush did remove all that ink from the page. It's not white, but it's going to come off. Bleach completely obliterates it, as we expect. We're left with a white spot. Don't use bleach to get this ink out of your pen. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with a realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Robert Oster's Caffe Crema has a viscosity of 2.21, making it an absolutely normal ink. To get my dry times, I use the writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds. With the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Robert Oster's Caffe Crema has an average dry time of 16 seconds, making it still a very normal ink. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I've got this ink in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. With the 1.1, we get no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, but we do get occasional color variation. Not huge amounts of color variation, but occasional amounts of color variation that are very nice to see. It's certainly a lighter tone than we get with the extra fine. On the extra fine, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, but tons of color variation the entire way. Now, this is a quality I find a lot in brown inks, and this one is no exception. 9 seconds to dry. The medium gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, absolutely shading the whole way through. 18 seconds to dry. The scrubby on the extra fine looks like we wouldn't expect as much color variation as we get, but the scrubby doesn't show the same as the writing. The medium shows us that we would expect color variation, and the smear makes me believe I could recover this. Tomoe River. With the exception of the scrubby where I put it on stupid thick, it looks like we're not going to get any bleeding, but we definitely get ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, but we do get some color variation, which is very nice. With the extra fine, it's certainly a darker tone. No feather, no spread. We are getting some halo around a bunch of these letters. We have little, almost looking like black outline of the letters, so that is very nice. It certainly makes the writing pop in how I'm seeing it. We have no sheen. We definitely get shading through, not tons of shading. We lose a bit of that shading here with Tomoe River. It often lets that ink dry out, but if I look at the word jumps, I see it's lighter and darker. Quick, I have lighter areas and darker areas. Fox, the same thing, lighter areas and darker areas. But the color variation is not as drastic as we might expect. 14 seconds to dry. Medium gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and if I ignore where my thumb goes, I get no color variation with the medium. When I look at the scrubby, the extra fine shows me little color variation. If you really look at the far left and the far right, there's a definite tone difference in the color variation we're getting there. Not tremendous. We get more of it in the writing than we do in the scrub. The medium shows us no color variation, and we got no color variation in the writing itself. This smear says we can't recover it because you wrote it on Tomoe River. Rhodia paper. Rhodia gives us no bleeding. This spot doesn't line up with the writing. It's a transfer. It's me being sloppy. Too often the problem. No ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shading. So while Rhodia paper is very nice, there's a bunch of times where we've seen it didn't perform as well as, say, the Clairefontaine. The extra fine is certainly a darker tone than we had with the 1.1. It has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shading. It looks very uniform here. 10 seconds to dry. The medium gives us no feather, no spread. We have moments of halo, just moments of halo. We have no sheen, and we do get color variation. So the medium's definitely giving us some qualities we were not getting with the extra fine. I see certain haloing going on in the brown and in the fox. I definitely see color variation in every word. We have 19 seconds to dry. When I look at the scrubby, the extra fine looks like it would have more color variation than it does. So this ink has been consistently lying to us in the scrubby as, compared to the writing. The medium shows us we're going to get color variation, and the smear test says we can likely recover this if it was smeared. So I looked at black and red paper. The black and red paper gave us no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 had no feather, no spread. The beginnings of halo on the very bottom of the C of cafe and the very bottom of the C of creme, at the very bottom of the O and Oster. So we have areas where we have the beginning of some halo, but it's not fully haloing anything. We have no sheen and no shade, not in the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and it does show us some color variation. More when we look from one word to another. Brown shows it in one word. It's darker on the left than it gets on the right. Quick shows it in the word. But then we get over, shows one tone, but the becomes a little bit darker. So we do get color variation with the extra fine. We get 7 seconds to dry. The medium gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and definite shading throughout. Again, the shading that goes on is not as much as on some other papers, but we're definitely getting it. So we see it in I see it in dry, in the 14, in brown. It's just not as stark a difference as we get other times, but it's still nice. 14 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine makes us feel that we would get a lot more color variation than we get because this ink has been lying in the scrubbies. The medium shows very little color variation, and we get more of it in the writing than we do in that scrub. The smear test makes me feel that I could not recover this if I smeared it. So then I tested this Elon Job notebook. This is notebooks that are made to be one job at a time. It's just a handful of pages, so that if you're a contractor, you do the one job in that one notebook and you can put it aside for referencing. It's largely an outdoor notebook. So I was just curious what happens when you test these with fountain pens. And we see that this paper doesn't hold up too well to inks, and we'll see that anytime this paper comes up. It really doesn't do well with fountain pens. But at that point I'd already had it, so I did test it at times. We definitely have bleed. I can't read it all the way through, so it's not ghosted entirely, but it bleeds enough that it's a problem. Some inks it bleeds through and touches the next page. This one it did not. With the 1.1 we have feathering all over it, tons of little feathers all over it. It almost looks blurry in person. We have some spread, definitely get some spread. We have no halo, we have no sheen, we have no color variation. The extra fine gives us, would you call it spread? It's a little bit of spread. It's not uncontrollable spread, so it's not wild, but it's definitely a tad bit thicker. So the extra fine, we get a little bit of spread. We definitely have some feathering, but the feathers are much smaller, much more under control. I don't think if you were writing in this paper with an extra fine, it would be the end of the world to you. We have no halo, no sheen, and no shading. 2 seconds to dry. The medium definitely has some feathering, definitely has some spread. Again, the amount of spread isn't the end of the world, but when I look at it, I think, you would definitely want to use the extra fine. It just performs a little bit better. No halo, no sheen, no shading. 3 seconds to dry. I don't think this ink looks nice on this paper. The extra fine and the medium scrubby show us we're going to get no color variation, but the smear test shows us if you were using this in the field on this paper, you would be able to recover it if you smeared it. So that's what I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding inks that look like Robert Oster's Caffe Crema, I would prefer to find an ink that would complement its color on the page. And I've chosen Diamine's Dark Green. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Robert Oster's Caffe Crema? As a brown ink, it's fantastic. It gives great shading on almost any paper with almost any nib. It is a standout performer that if you like brown inks, this is one to definitely sample and give a shot to. I know that plenty of people have looked at it, and I know that it's not an unknown ink, but I don't know that people that like brown necessarily run for it. Thanks for watching.